Hi, my name is Claire Welsh, and this is a presentation of my research proposal on temporary spatial interventions. The main question I am researching is, how does the experience of temporary spatial interventions affect the sense of place and identity of individuals who live in urban environments? I am qualified to do this project as I have a background in architectural design, as well as a personal interest and recreational engagement with temporary interventions. I have now developed a familiarity with the subject from doing preliminary research into temporary interventions, both from a theoretical and ethnographic perspective. The focus of this research project was to understand how the experience of temporary spatial interventions affects the sense of place and identity of individuals who live in urban environments. For the purpose of this research project, temporary interventions can be defined as the intentional inhabitation of urban space for a short period of time in order to change the use or perception of that space. Examples of temporary interventions are events such as short-term outdoor cinemas, artistic installations such as exterior audio, visual or sculptural installations, pop-up restaurants, bars and cafes, as well as pop-up retail. The existing spaces can be interior or exterior, but they are often vacant or underused sites. The time span for temporary installations can vary from hours to years, but they are installed with their ease of removal in mind. There are different levels of knowing and understanding of both place and identity. An individual can know a place intimately or at a more general and conceptual level. Identity can also be considered at the level of an individual or as a greater collective identity of a whole group of people. The objective of this project is to understand how this experience can shape both an individual's perception of identity and as part of a collective identity of people who live in the same urban environment. Concepts of place that this project will consider in order to understand these two levels is a specific interaction between an individual and a temporary place, and also at a more conceptual understanding of the greater urban environment that provides the context for that temporary place. In order to understand this phenomenological relationship at a number of different scales, the research will focus on several different questions to investigate different aspects of the experience. These aspects are shown in this experience model. How does the experience of temporary interventions affect people's identity? What attracts people to a temporary intervention? How do people experience a temporary intervention? How do people interact with a temporary intervention? And how does it affect people's perception of the city and their identity? This research topic fits into a number of different fields, including philosophy, architectural, urban and spatial studies, psychology, marketing, art and design, as well as government planning policy. For the preliminary research gathering phase of this project, philosophical and phenomenological theories of place were investigated by comparing descriptions of people's experience against the assertions of these theories. Two main opposing theorists in the field are Relf and Massey. Relf asserts a number of different characteristics of place. That it has a clearly delineated interior and exterior, is the focusing of an activity or activities in a specific space, and that there is a continuity of activity and spatial qualities over time. On the other hand, Massey outlines that place is dynamic and constantly developing and changing. To her, place is the nexus of political, social, economical, and cultural forces, and that it is the specific juxtaposition and conflicting relationships between these forces that makes any one place unique. Massey's position is most complementary to the concept of temporary interventions, as it describes place as a juxtaposition of elements that is constantly changing. However, the research also supported elements of Relf's description of place, such as the importance of a pattern of activity and the presence of a number of people in the perception of place. Research participants also described the strong sense of interior atmosphere and a clear delineation of the threshold between inside and outside as important in creating a sense of place. The concept of the importance of the continuity of spatial qualities and activity over time in creating place is where Relf's position does not apply to temporary interventions. These theories have informed the experience model and the framing of the research. To begin with, what attracts people to a temporary intervention? Whilst there are some correlations between the testimonials of the research participants and Relf's theory, Massey's theory of place seems to be the most accurate in capturing the essence of what temporary interventions do and why they are successful in attracting people. Most participants describe the brevity of the possibility to experience a temporary intervention and the unique experience of the combination of space and activity that they offer as the two aspects that motivate them to go. How do people experience a temporary intervention? The descriptions of place experience described by the participants also supported the position of another place theorist, Chuang, that it is perceived as a combination of sensory perception and the interpretation of cultural cues. Evidence from the research suggests that the perception of the temporary intervention as having the potential to offer a good experience was crucial in attracting people. Research participants described seeing and hearing other people enjoy the experience, the smells of drink and food, and the anticipation of having a culturally unique experience as reasons why they visited. How do people interact with temporary interventions? Theories of non-place were crucial in gaining an understanding on how a non-place is transformed into a place through interaction. Non-place is considered a consequence of modernity and urbanization. Two aspects of Augier's concept of non-place that were considered is how non-place discourages social interaction and how it is not grounded in any place or culture. Temporary interventions inhabit existing places, and the successful relationship between installation and existing place, its grounding in the existing place and activity, proved to be an important aspect in the success of the considered temporary interventions in creating place. The interaction encouraged by the interventions, such as passive interaction, such as emotional or intellectual stimulation, as well as conversation and activity, were also important in transforming non-places into places. Initial research into the psychological relationship between home and identity also framed some of the focus of investigation. How does the experience of temporary interventions affect people's identity? Many of the research participants described their choice to engage with the culture of temporary interventions as acting as a reinforcement of their self-identity. Amongst other things, it demonstrates that they are open to new things. How does it affect people's perception of the city and their identity? Research participants described how the experience of temporary interventions can shape the way in which they think and feel about their home at a range of scales, from their neighborhood to their home city. It was also suggested by one of the participants that temporary interventions reflect the dynamic and diverse nature of contemporary culture, and hence they reflect a collective identity. The efficacy of a number of different methods in collecting qualitative data were tested. These were interviews both in context and out, self-documentation kits, and observation. All three demonstrated advantages and disadvantages. The in-context interview that was conducted allowed the interviewee to look around and be prompted by the environment. It also allowed the interviewer to participate in the experience along with the interviewee in order to have a better understanding of the context of the interview. The two participatory games that were part of the self-documentation kit, the visual story and the card sort, proved to be effective in gathering good information from the participants. The visual story required the participant to visit a temporary installation and take photos of the four aspects that were important in creating a sense of place. This was good in understanding what aspects were perceived as important by the participant. The card sort was useful in demonstrating how the participant thought and felt about the relationship between the temporary installation they visited and the city that it was in at a more conceptual level. The self-documentation kit allowed participants to be more reflective about their answers than during the interviews, as they had more time to think about the questions. Observation proved not to be as useful in understanding how a person perceives, thinks, and feels about the experience they are having. For the future research projects, a combination of in-context interviews and the distribution of brief self-documentation kits is suggested. The collection of qualitative data, such as who goes to temporary interventions, when they go, where they go, and how often they go, would also be useful in developing a more complete understanding. In conclusion, the potential knowledge gained through conducting this research can be applied effectively in many different disciplines, as a number of different scales of spatial intervention. Examples include informing designers, architects, artists, and brand marketers on how to design more successful temporary interventions, and at a larger scale, how local governments can encourage the establishment of a culture of temporary interventions to revitalize inhabitants' perception of place.